So I'm gonna create a class called car. We'll just use car for this example. All classes must have an uppercase name. Its superclass is going to be the mother of all classes, the object class, and I'll just hit finish right here, and we're going to create a property called ID. So I'll make it private, and it's going to be an int and ID, and now it's private, so that means that it won't be visible outside of this class. Now what does that mean? I'll show you what it means here. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to go back to my app driver, and I'm going to create an instance of this car. So I'm going to do car C1 equals new car. Now if I do C1 dot ID, I'll get an error. Now let's just try and print that out. Let's do system.out.println C1.id. Now here's a little error message over here in Eclipse, and it's saying that the field car.id is not visible. Well, it's because it's private. If I make this public, then it will be visible. Now you can see my error went away and everything's fine. But by convention, we want to make our instance variables such as ID private, and we use setters and getters to access them, to change them or to access them. So here's what I'm going to do here. I put it back to private, and then I'm going to make a public method that with a void return value, and it's going to be called set ID, just like this. And it's going to take a parameter, and the parameter is going to be an int, and we're going to make that the name of the parameter is going to be ID as well. And your setter will usually look like this. This.id equals ID. Now we've had some confusion in the past with some people not understanding what's going on here with this. By convention, we name this parameter the same as the instance variable that we're changing. So we actually have two versions of ID. One is the parameter and one is the instance variable. So how does Java know the difference between them? Well, when you use this.id, it will know whenever you're using this, you're always talking about the instance variable. So now we could change this parameter, some ID, and now it's not ambiguous. And maybe this would be better, but it's not the convention that people use. So in this case, you wouldn't need this because there's only one version of ID. There's no copies floating around, so it's clear. So this would be just fine, but you don't see this by convention. In Java, what you see is this. All right, enough about that. Let's make the getter for it too. Public. This is going to return an int, and we're going to call it get ID. And we'll do simply return this.id, or since it's not ambiguous in this case, there is no other version of ID to deal with it. Up here in the setter, we had the parameter, which was an ID, but in the get ID, you can just do it like this. So you'll see this a lot, and you'll hopefully have done this a lot. So I'm just going to save this, go back over to app driver, and now we've got our error message back because we turned that back into a private variable, and it's not visible because it's private. It's only visible within the car class for code that's in the car class. We're in the app driver class, so it's not visible. But we have our getter here, so we can do get ID. Now the ID, we haven't set a value, so it's an integer, and integers default to 0. And so let's use our setter up here before we print it out. Let's do c1 dot set ID, and let's set it to 10, and then print it out, or I'll run the app. So to run the app here, you just click this run button, and then you'll see the output in the console down below it down here. So hit the run button, and you can see down here there's my output. Now I want to show you why we use setters and getters. Let's say somebody is using our car class in their application, and they do this. They set it to -10. But for the purposes of our cars, you shouldn't have a negative ID for a car. When the cars roll off the factory line, they get a sequential ID. We can think of it like as their VIN number. I don't know if this works the same for VIN numbers, but you know, as each car comes off, they get an ID of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and so forth. So a negative ID is not valid, and this is exactly why we don't make the ID instance variable public, because there's nothing right now that's stopping me from making the ID -10, which is invalid. So what I want to do, I'm just going to save this here. I'm going to go back to my car class here, and I'm going to write some validation code in my setter. So I'm going to do if ID is less than or equal to 0, then I'm not going to write the code for this, but we'd throw an error, some sort of error saying, hey, you can't set the ID to a negative number. But anyways, that code would go in here. So that's a very quick rundown on setters and getters. One last thing about setters and getters. Now Eclipse has a feature for us that'll save you some time, and this feature is also available in Android Studio, but it can automatically generate our setters and getters for us. So I'm going to create another instance variable, and this time it's going to be a string, and I'm going to call it color. Okay, so I've got my private color instance variable, but I don't have setters and getters for it. If I go over to source and do generate getters and setters, click that, and then now what this little box will show all of the instance variables that don't have setters and getters. So you can see ID is not showing up because it's already got the getter and setter, but color is available here. So I'm going to check this one and then hit OK, and then you'll notice that right here it created the setter and getter for us in using the same conventions that I discussed earlier. So we've got our color parameter here, and they're using this dot color so that we know that the color right here refers to our instance variable because it's got this prefix before it. So I can't remember what the shortcut for this is in Android Studio, but you can do the same thing. It'll save you some time, and hopefully you know, it'll ensure that you won't make any syntax errors that you have to deal with later.